What was your salary back then?
It was about $52,000 the first year. So I had a corporate job. So I did corporate stuff for about 10 years. And then 2015, I got laid off. We ended up selling our place. So I put together a plan of cutting grass.
When you were laid off, what made you actually to go into entrepreneurship versus not looking for a different job?
If you're not working all the time, especially if you have a toxic work environment, or you don't have to commute, whether it's, flying somewhere or you have to sit in traffic. Like when you cut those things out, people are usually way happier. I was earning a little bit of money on the side still. So I was like, I can figure it out.
So you were working on some side hustles.
Within 6 months, I made like $6,000 in a month. We were accumulating money. So we had over 6 figures just in savings account. But knowing what I know now, if I would have invested in...
When did you actually come across financial independence?
I was making enough money and had enough money in savings and stuff where I would overspend and be a little careless and reckless and didn't think about it too much. And one mistake that happened...
Can you talk more about financial independence for somebody who is not aware of it?
Number one thing, you have to understand the expenses.
So what is one small step that you would recommend people take?
I think people end up wasting money on certain things that they think they care about, but really they don't. We started investing in don't get investment advice from, and I think that's the best advice that I can give.
Hello and welcome to the Compounding Project podcast, where we talk about taking small steps to become healthy, wealthy, and wise. I'm your host, Satish Kajula, and this episode is all about wealth, especially financial independence. Our guest today is Doug Cunnington, who is joining us from Colorado, US. Doug is a blogger, podcaster, and a key figure in the financial independence community. He's also a YouTuber with 130,000 plus subscribers. He's been featured on CNBC, Yahoo Finance, NASDAQ.com, and many more. He's the co-host of the Mile High 5 podcast with Carl Jensen, where they talk about financial independence, side hustles, and interview experts in the FI community. He'll be sharing his tools, tips, and strategies for reaching financial independence and living the life that you want to live. With that, Doug, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm pumped to be here.
So I first came across your content while watching Carl Jensen, like Mr. 1500 on a YouTube podcast, and then I got into this rabbit hole of discovering who Doug Cunnington is and what his podcast is about. So I'm excited for this conversation. So before we dig deeper, can you talk about at a high level who you are and what you do?
So these days I run a couple podcasts and YouTube channels, and it's really sort of a work optional situation. So I know this will all come together. But right now I'm just working on stuff that I enjoy, and that's having conversations with people like you and maybe book authors and stuff like that. And I came about it in a very roundabout way. So I had a corporate job, probably actually similar to some of the work that you do. So I was in management consulting. I have a computer engineering degree. So I did corporate stuff for about 10 years. And I started a side hustle in 2013. And then 2015, I got laid off. So I just grew my side hustle from there. And I had online courses. I was doing affiliate marketing. My main Doug Cunnington YouTube channel is mostly about SEO and entrepreneurship and that sort of thing. And along the way, I started a podcast called The Doug Show. And that's the one that I've been running since 2019. I moved to Longmont, Colorado, and met Carl Jensen. He was a guest on my show a couple times, and then I kind of got integrated into the FIRE community overall. And then he and I started a show called Mile High 5. So all that sort of distilled down to, work is optional. I'm a sort of a content creator, which I never thought I would be doing that.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I'm the same boat as well. So I want to talk more about the stuff that you did after post 2013, but I want to maybe come back to your childhood. What was your childhood like when it comes to money?
I think probably most people say, it's pretty normal because it's what we know. But I'll set the context and say it was probably probably right in the middle of middle class. And a lot of people don't know where they fall, or maybe we overestimate. But my mom was a nurse, and my dad was a firefighter. So I think pretty solidly in sort of the middle class area. We had whatever we needed. We were able to, take some karate lessons or play basketball or do whatever activities that we wanted to do. And my parents were very good budgeting and just generally living within our means. So we never needed anything, but they never overextended themselves. And, for many years, like driving older cars, older used cars, and not overextending. And same with the housing. So I was just visiting my dad back in Atlanta, and he's still in the same house that he bought like 35 years ago. So they didn't move too much. So I would say pretty normal. And I got kind of a frugal upbringing overall. I like a good deal, like many of us. And if I can, if I'm at the grocery store, still to this day, I'll compare the unit prices just to get the cheese that's a little bit cheaper or whatever. So, some of those habits are tough. You know what I mean, right?
Yes. I mean, that's already in my blood, I guess. It's just that, no matter where I go, I still have, I still drive to places just to save some, something on gas, just a few bucks at gas. But yeah, I can totally relate to that.
Yep. And I didn't. So while I had a good upbringing as far as living within your means, I didn't get some of those lessons that I've heard now. Some of my friends, now that I'm 45 years old, some of my friends got the advice when they were in college. Hey, invest in your Roth, invest in this. If you just, these are the kind of funds you want to aim for. I didn't get that from my family. So I was exposed to some of those ideas early in my career. So I was a little bit slower than I could have been, but overall ended up in a good spot. But I think, like I said, since we're all brought up in our own little bubble, I think we all feel like it's mostly normal, but I don't know what sort of neuroses I have because it's just internal, right?
True. I mean, I can totally understand. So you had this, I believe, I keep saying this on the podcast, the only money lesson that I learned growing up was just save money. That's it. Just save money. And I didn't have any direction as to what to do with the saved money, but that was the only money lesson that I learned growing up, right? I assume it's the same for you as well.
Yeah. And I remember getting savings bonds and that sort of thing growing up. And actually one sort of adjacent point, but pretty important, when I was about 12 years old, I wanted to get a CD player. And my dad was like, well, if you get a CD player, how are you going to get the CDs? So he said, think about it and figure out what you need to do. So I put together a plan of cutting grass. So I was like, I'll do lawn care or I'll wash people's cars. And the next day, I started pushing my lawnmower up the street and went to, I started at the neighbor, and they said, well, we don't need our grass cut. We have somebody to do that, but we need our cars washed. So I started doing that from age 12 and did it until I went to college. But I ended up, to your point, saving a lot. So I never got a job at the grocery store or McDonald's or anything like that. I was cutting grass, and, this is the early mid 90s or so.
Yeah.
And I was making, $20, $30 an hour, which was a lot because minimum wage was $5 an hour back then or so. And I just hoarded the money. I put it in the savings account. But knowing what I know now, if I would have invested in index funds, then that would have been, a huge amount of money at this point. So
Yep. Yeah. Try running some compounding calculations with that money. It'll just blow your mind.
Yeah. So I've never done that because I don't want to face the reality.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we can't cry or spill milk, but yeah. So where did you go to school, and what was your first job that you ever got?
So I went to school at Georgia Tech. So being from Atlanta, I went there, and the first job. So actually, one note, I did the co-op program. So if people aren't familiar, it is I think it's every other semester or term, you go to school or work, and you earn a decent amount of money. So I started at Nortel Networks in the late 90s, and then they got hit with the dot-com bubble. So I eventually got laid off there, but I worked there for a few years doing software development. And then fast forward, eventually I graduated. It took longer because I did do the co-op program.
Oh,
And it took me about 6.5 years, but I ended up at Accenture, the management consulting company, which, huge employer. Funny enough, my grades weren't high enough to get into the recruiting round, but I had an intro from one of my friends that got a job there. So I got a referral. So I came in the side door and got a job. I only worked there for about 2 years because consulting's tough with the travel. And I wasn't built for the competitive nature of management consulting.
yeah.
So I did it for a few years and then I went somewhere else.
Got it. Okay. So what at that time, like, were you doing any investments, or was it just just saving money? And so when did you even come across the financial independence, the concept of FI?
All right. So in the orientation, we had some good mentors and instructors, and they were like, you have a good 401k here, like invest there. So I did start investing in the 401k, which I don't remember the match, but I think I did at least double the match to get whatever maximizing I could.
Yep.
But I also, towards the end of the year, I was like, hey, I can max out my 401k. And at the time it was like $17,000 or $18,000. So by the end of the year, like the last quarter, I turned up my contributions to like 25 or 30% to max it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for at least a couple or a few years, which now, to your point earlier, compounding, right?
Yeah.
So the compound, like I knew that was going to be a good thing. And, one mistake that happened that year. So I did well on the 401k angle. They had a stock purchase plan. So I would get that and then sell it immediately. So that's a 15% gain right away.
Mm-hmm.
And I got introduced by a friend to, I won't say the company, but it's an insurance company that poses as an investment advisement, so don't get investment advice from an insurance salesman. And I did that because I got a warm intro and I bought a whole life policy. At the same time, I did set up my Roth. So I was contributing some into there, but not enough. I wish I would have put more in. So that's sort of the early years. And I kept, with the 401k, maxing it out early on was a big deal, and got a Roth going. But I think I was only putting in, say, $100 or $200 per month. So not even close to the limit of what I could put in there. But at least I was putting something in there. And then horrible whole life policy, which ended up being, obviously just a waste.
Yep. So what was like, so when it comes to maxing out 401k, right? I mean, I'll tell you like my story a little bit. When I first started, I did not have any idea as to what 401k was, because we were never taught about it, especially like coming from India. We were never taught about it. So I was, I did not know where to invest my money or how much to invest, in 401k, right? And then the only reason why I did a 401k match was I thought that was free money. That's it. Like there was a free money, and then I was getting a 6% match, and I was putting 6%. And that's it, because I didn't want to put any more, because I thought that is for retirement, for like post 65. Like why would I care about my retirement post 65? So I was just doing the match and no other investments. But in your case, like when it comes to like maxing out 401k, that's big, especially in your first job. Maxing out 401k is a big deal. So was it a friend or colleague or like book, or how did you come to know about this 401k?
So I know in the orientation at Accenture, like I know we learned about it then, like because they tell you about your benefits, but I don't know exactly why, or I can't attribute it to any one person other than just like knowing that I had extra money that I could invest and it would be fine.
Okay.
So I don't know. I didn't study. I didn't read other books or any kind of thing. I think I was just like, well, this is for retirement. And it was outside of like hearing from the insurance salesman from that company that we won't mention.
Okay. All right. If you don't mind sharing, like what was your salary back then? Because you're maxing out 401k, which is like 17 to 18 grand a year. That's a significant amount.
Yeah. So it was 52. So it was about 52,000 the first year, and then it it slowly went up. I would say like on average, like 5% a year for a few years. And I moved jobs and then it slowed down. And it was also during like the Great Recession timeframe too. So raises were slower to come. But yeah, it was around 52 starting off. And then by the time I got laid off 10 years later, it was a little over 100 or so.
Okay. Got it. So yeah, let's talk about like financial independence. Like when did you actually come across financial independence?
So my wife and I started tracking our net worth in around 2014 or so. And I'll preface and say my wife is very good with a budget. She always has been since she was probably in college or so, or maybe even late high school, but college. She would track her spending on a weekly basis. And she does an awesome job. So she knows where like every dollar's going. And I wasn't that way. Like I was making enough money and had enough money in savings and stuff where I would overspend and be a little careless and reckless and didn't think about it too much. And in 2014, we had started accumulating more money. And she had an advisor from her dad. So her dad was working with someone. So my wife started working with that person. And I was working with the insurance agency basically. And they got some stuff set up okay. But around 2014, we realized that we were actually managing our own retirement accounts better than what our advisors were. So our advisors were putting in like weird funds, or there were high fees, or they got a commission, or the structure was just all wrong. Yeah. And they would say, "Oh, this is diversification. There's a new fund that popped up. I think it will be good for you." And I didn't know. And then eventually I stopped trusting them and then realized that we were accumulating money. So we had over 6 figures just in savings account or something, right? It was doing nothing. But we knew we didn't trust the advisors, but we weren't yet confident enough. So my wife searched and she found Mr. Money Mustache. It was 2014. And we read about just allocations and index funds. So the funny thing is, especially now Pete is a friend of mine, the funny thing is we read his blog a little bit just about the investing. And then we started investing that way in index funds. I fired the insurance company, pulled all the money out. She fired her person and brought it over to her own accounts. And then we never read his blog again. I never read his blog. So like it was all right there if I just would have read the blog, right?
Yeah.
However, the good part, it's so silly, right?
Yeah.
The good part is we were living within our means and we were saving a good amount. So that all worked out good. And even without adopting some of his other principles and ideas and stuff, we were on a good track. So I'll fast forward and then I'll pause for a second here, but we went along on our way. We ended up selling our place in Atlanta. We moved out west and we were traveling a bit and sort of digital nomads for about 3 months or so. But we were doing a slow travel style of it. So we would stay at a place for a little while. And the thing is, in 2017, Mr. Money Mustache was on the Tim Ferriss podcast. Yep. And I remember listening to it a few times and I was like, I've heard of this guy before. And then I got really obsessed with the idea. And by that time, I was an entrepreneur working for myself. I was making so much more money than I was at my corporate job and I was working less. And I was like, this is within our reach. Like, I think we could stop working like in a few years. And my wife and I butted heads on it a little bit, but eventually like she just retired like 6 months ago. So 2017 is when when I started like, this is a thing we can do. And I want to slow down. I don't want to keep being an entrepreneur forever. I just want to get enough and then do what I want.
Right. Yeah. I think there is so much to unpack right there in just your journey. So in 2013, so you were working for a corporate job, right? You were in a corporate job then, and then you were laid off in 2015. So, so you were at that time you had been working for 10 years, if I understood you're right.
Yeah, right around that. Yeah, I think I started. Yeah.
Okay. So in those 10-year span, the only investments were 401k and Roth IRA and some insurance deal that you had with this insurance company. Was that it, or was there anything else?
I think that's it. The one thing, I can't remember exactly what year, but it was around 2015. We stopped investing in the 401k and the Roth, and we started investing in post-tax brokerage accounts because we wanted flexibility. We also didn't do research on the fact that you can access some funds sooner before 59 and a half.
Yep.
But by 2015, I had tasted the Kool-Aid of like entrepreneurship and working for yourself.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't want to work for another company, and I don't want to work until I'm 59 and a half to access that money. So the easiest way, though not optimal from a tax and overall return situation, but at this point in time, we have, I think like 2/3 of our net worth in post-tax brokerage and about 1/3 in retirement accounts. And we're 45 and 46. So by the time we get to 59 and a half, there's a mature set of retirement accounts, and we have full flexibility, though, again, not optimal from a tax perspective. We have full flexibility to do whatever we want.
Yeah, I think I would say like in hindsight, it's a great strategy because, you're just putting money, like 401k money at your younger years, so that is, it just keeps compounding, and then you're working on the post-tax brokerage account so that, it will be available like whenever you need it before retirement. Yeah, that's a great strategy. So you said 2014 is when you actually started working on like net worth. Your wife found Mr. Money Mustache, and then you were like looking into your finances. So would you mention like what was your net worth at that point when you actually started tracking?
You know what? I don't remember, but if I had to just estimate, I would say like 200 to 300K.
Okay,
maybe 200.
Okay.
Yeah, so nothing too crazy.
Okay. So nothing too crazy. And then, so you were working on some side hustles before that, or what happened there in 2015?
Yeah. So this is a good one. And now that I look back, the framing of it is pretty funny. So in 2013, I randomly found a podcast called Smart Passive Income. Do you know the show?
Yeah, Pat Flynn.
Yeah. And I was like, this sounds like a scam. And for the people that don't know, like at that point in time, Pat Flynn and Smart Passive Income and sort of that ecosystem, they were focusing on like niche sites, which are like small sites that earn money either through affiliate marketing or ads. And I got obsessed. It was kind of a cool blend of like new technology and some technical know-how. So with my computer engineering degree, I was like, I could set up websites. This seems cool. And I was like, well, I've always cut grass or done some side hustle. I have like an entrepreneurial spirit or something. So within a month or two, I started up a couple sites, and well, it was a train wreck. Nothing worked. But within like 6 months, I was earning like thousands of dollars per month. And it was a roller coaster ride. I'll tell you, like it got within 6 months, I made like $6,000 in a month, and I was like, I'm a genius. And then the next month it went down, and I thought, I don't know what I'm doing. So through some trial and error and the roller coaster ride, I ended up doing the same thing again, and like I figured out like things that worked. So I did build up some of the sites, and what happened was my wife and I realized like, hey, we want to travel some. We want to go out west. We've lived in Atlanta our whole lives. We both went to Georgia Tech. We lived in the suburbs. So we were like, we can move anywhere. We like the mountains. So why don't we head out to Montana and, go to some national parks and just hang out. So we went to Whitefish, Montana, and then Bozeman, Montana. We liked Bozeman so much, we actually stayed there and lived there for about 4 years. And it was amazing. It's a beautiful place. And I advise people to visit and check out Yellowstone if they have a chance to. And the thing is, I was working remotely at the time, and I just moved, and I told my boss, I guess I had FU money at that point and some confidence. So I said, I would love to work it out, and we can make it work. Everyone's been working remotely anyway. And I was on the front end of layoff. So they didn't say it was because I moved, but basically over the next year, they laid off a lot of the team, and I was like the very first person. Even though I was actually a high performer, I was like the best manager on the team, and my team outperformed the others. But I got laid off. And the weird part, the awful part is other people had relocated to other states, but they didn't tell their boss. And I was honest. I told my boss and said, hey, I moved, and this is like what the situation is. And then I got in trouble for it. But in hindsight, being laid off was like the best thing ever. I'm so glad. I didn't like working for other people.
So when you were laid off, like, what made you actually to go into entrepreneurship versus like, not looking for a different job? So what so you said you had, you said you had a few money back then, if I understood you right?
Yeah, I wouldn't have described it that way, but I guess I was just like, I can figure it out. Like, if they don't want me to work here, I'll figure it out.
Okay.
I was earning a little bit of money on the side still. So since 2013, again, with the roller coaster ride, but I was still earning maybe like $1,500 to $2,000 per month on the side. So it wasn't replacement income, but it was something. And the other thing is there were a couple months where I made probably like $8,000 or $9,000, and that was replacement income. So I thought, if I did it before, then surely I could do it again. I should be getting better as I'm getting experience. So that's when I was a little more strategic, and I tested a few different business models, and some of them worked really well, but it wasn't a good fit. Like I started essentially a marketing SEO agency. It was very profitable, but I didn't like the work, and I didn't like working with clients. So I ended up, building my own niche sites, which did really well. And then I also built an online course, which it's a bit of a weird area. And I know a lot of your audience is probably familiar with the make money online situation, and it could be a little scammy, but I tried to bring my professionalism. I was a PMP, so I talked about just frameworks and templates and systems and continuous improvement and that sort of thing. And that really resonated with the audience of like IT professionals. So a lot of my audience was just like IT professionals just like me that didn't like their job and they wanted to do something on the side. So I ran those online courses from 2016 until I just set them like earlier this year, because the whole industry has changed. So I was like, you know what, it's time to retire these. But yeah, online courses ended up being a really fun thing to do for a few years.
Got it. Okay. I want to come back to what you said on like in 2017 on the when you listen to Mr. Money Mustache on Tim Ferriss show. I mean, I listened to that podcast episode myself, but at that time I had consumed a lot of like Mr. Money Mustache blog, on Simple Path to Wealth, and I was like, when I saw him on the podcast, I was like, okay, I knew at least what he was going to say, but it was a big deal. But I still, I listened to the whole podcast, and it was, a really good one. I think it changed a lot of people's life, that podcast episode, when it comes to financial independence. So can you talk more about financial independence for somebody who is not aware of it, and what is 4% rule and all the basics of FI?
Sure, I'll cover as much as I can. I'm not as good of an expert as some of the other guests that you've had on, but generally, I'll maybe talk to myself as I was a young corporate person. I didn't know how much I needed to save to actually retire. If you go Google around, you may find people say you need $10 million, which sounds impossible when you're making under 100K, and it doesn't make sense. Or they say you need 80% of what you're earning your last couple of years, which is just wrong. It's the wrong way to look at it. So with the FIRE community, or at least with advisors that are more reasonable, people that we would want to work with potentially, they look at like what your expenses are, not what your earnings are or some huge number. So the main idea is like understanding how much you need to retire. So you would start off with like what your annual expenses are. You could use the 4% rule, which says you could withdraw like 4% of your nest egg and reliably not run out of money. So there's a little debate on, is it 5%, is it 3% or whatever, but 4 is probably good.
Mhm.
And basically, you could take your expenses, use the reciprocal, and multiply by 25, and that gets you in the ballpark. It's not going to be perfect. You may have some other, maybe real estate income. Maybe there's some inheritance coming your way. Maybe your expenses are going to be higher because you're moving to another place. And the fact is, your expenses will always change. Whatever you think it's going to be, you're wrong.
Yep.
It's going to be something a little bit different because we don't know inflation and a number of other factors.
Mhm.
But the 4% rule, it gets you in the ballpark. And, when I talk to maybe some of my relatives and, younger relatives that are in college right now, like that's the kind of stuff I'm telling them. Because if they know that, like if I knew that when I was 18, like I probably would have retired like Pete when he was about 30,
Yeah.
because like you have so much control over it.
Yep.
So
Yep. Okay, so that's 4% rule, which is like 25 times of your annual expenses, and then once you have that in your nest egg, you can at that point you have enough so that your portfolio covers your annual expenses. Yep, that's great. So for somebody who's just starting out with a corporate job, or for somebody who's been working for like 5 years, 10 years, and who want to become financially independent, like what advice would you recommend?
think so. Everyone will be a little bit different. So
Mhm.
I think you have to look at your specific situation and understand, like, do you want to completely stop working like your current job, and maybe do like a part-time job? Do you want to travel full time? So kind of understand like what you want to do. And it's really hard to predict like what you're going to be like in whatever 10 years, and what your life's going to be like and what you want to do. So you kind of have to look at it like that. But, number one thing, you have to understand like the expenses. So my wife really helped me out with that. And
Yep.
like even currently, budgeting is more her expertise, but I live within the constraints that we have, and that's totally fine. But like once you understand your expenses, then it's really just a math problem. And we have different tools depending on like where you work and if you get like a 401k match or not, and how much money you have invested already. And do you earn too much so that you can't contribute to a Roth in a straightforward manner? So again, we have a lot of tools that we can use. And I think once you understand your overall expenses, and then of course you have your income, you could just work on the delta there. And the more you could save, I mean, it's pretty obvious, the more you can save as a percentage, then the faster you're going to be able to retire. And there's some nice charts and graphs. And, if you save 60%, then you're going to be able to retire in like 11 years or something like that. But it's all out there. It's just, it's a pretty simple math problem. But the biggest advice, I guess, is what I've learned from Carl Jensen and other people in that sort of early like FIRE bloggers, where they were trying to retire as soon as possible, and they stressed themselves out overall. Like they saved too much, and they deprived themselves, and maybe they worked too hard when they could have just relaxed a little bit and enjoyed life. And it's something that I feel like I sort of naturally did after I got laid off, because I knew that I wasn't working super hard to sit at my laptop longer. I was doing it so I could go outside and do other stuff. So it was really easy for me once I started working for myself to say, I'm taking all Fridays off. Like I'm not doing anything on Fridays, or I'm only working for like 4 hours most days, that sort of thing. So it was very easy for me to just like make sure I was doing stuff that I enjoyed, hanging out with people and having community. So that's the part that people are talking about a lot more now. People talk about Coast-Fi, and they hit a solid amount of savings, and then they're like, I'm going to get a part-time job. I don't need as much. I don't need to save as much. And then they'll have a lot more free time. And it turns out, if you're not working all the time, especially if you have a toxic work environment, or you don't have to commute, whether it's, flying somewhere or you have to sit in traffic, like when you cut those things out, people are usually way happier.
Yeah. I watched your podcast on money when it comes to happiness, spending money for happiness. on the Choose FI podcast. I mean, yeah, that's a good one as well. So I want to talk about a few challenges, right? So I mean, I found FI in 2017, and then I was like immediately hooked on the concept of financial independence, and then I changed all my investments based on the same thing, like in index funds and all that cool stuff. So when I talk about FI to my friends, and then the biggest challenge they say they face is when it comes to like saving, we can't save enough. That's when they are getting like they're all like IT engineers, and they're like software engineers. They make like more than 100K, which I know, but still they say like we can't save money, and then which is why like our portfolio doesn't grow. So in your opinion, what are some of the common mistakes that people make when it comes to saving, and when it comes to money in general?
Yeah, money is such a like personal thing, as we all know. And I want to say it's probably spending money on things you don't care about. Because I think people end up wasting money on certain things that they think they care about, but really they don't. So that was something my wife and I did a pretty good job at, as we were like running through expenses and like, do we need to spend this much on that? And sometimes you have to test things to see like what's going on. Of course, I think we all probably know like the biggest areas are housing, cars, and food, right? Like those are usually the big three for most people. So you can look there for the big wins. And I mean, that's going to be a hard thing to change. Like, let's say you have a pretty big house in a nice neighborhood. It's a little hard to unwind that. And right now, when we're recording this, interest rates are a little bit high and housing supply is a little bit low in most places. So like that's a tough one to fix. So, I would look at it from, an 80-20 situation where it's like, can we get a big bang for our buck? The little stuff, I mean, it matters a little bit, especially like compounding over time. But, if you have the wrong cell phone plan and you're paying whatever, 40% more, and you're not using Mint Mobile or something, like that makes a difference. But I mean, you're going to get a bigger bang for your buck if you don't buy new cars all the time. Like I have a truck that I bought like, it's like almost 20 years ago now, which is insane. And it wasn't even a nice truck then. It's just, that's not a thing I value. If you do value that stuff, you have to take it into account. So if you like cars, get cars, but make sure you're cutting something out. So I would say it's like a value-based spending situation. So if you align that, then you'll probably be in good shape. What advice do you give?
Oh yeah, I usually tell. I mean, I read this book called Millionaire Next Door, and that book like changed my thinking when it comes to like what's money, who are actually rich people, right? Because for me, like after I graduated, I was waiting to clear my student loans, right? I mean, I did that in 1 year, and then I had money at that point that I was like I wanted to do something with that money. And then all my friends were like, they were buying new cars. I mean, that's a common theme that I see. Like, they were buying like Audis and, Volvos and stuff. So I was very tempted to buy that. And then I read this book, like I said, like Money Next Door. And then it talks about like all this data when it comes to like, who are these actual millionaires, right? They are these regular people who live in regular households and who drive like, regular cars. And then, but they are like millionaires, if not like multi-millionaires. I was like, that completely changed my thinking, because, I thought, people who had expensive houses and expensive luxury cars, I thought they were rich people. But actually this book, completely changed my thinking. So that's, which is why I since like 10 years, I was just initially got a used car. I used a Honda that I drove for like 5 years. And after I got married, I got a 1-year-old Camry that I'm still driving right now. Like, for 10 years, just 2 cars, probably like a $20,000 investment. Like, I wouldn't consider it as investment, but yeah, that's what it is when it comes to cars. But when it comes to houses, I was renting places, and I was initially I was house hacking. Like I was, living with some friends, and then we were like sharing our rent and stuff. So, and then when it comes to food, I mean, we were talking about big three, housing, food, and transportation. So I had my housing covered. I had my transportation covered. And when it comes to food, I was not like, going out a lot. At that time, I wanted to. But again, like, if I was being just little smart when it comes to like meal prepping and stuff. So these three areas were covered. So I was tempted to cut my small spending, but if you really look at the math, these big three are the ones that move the needle, right? So I tell people the same thing, but again, like it's very hard to, especially when you live in a place, it's very hard to like sell that place or move to a different place. But cars and food is something that I think it's completely within our control. So that this is the advice that I give people, and it's a math problem, just like you said, and then this is the advice that I would give. And again, when it comes to like, yeah, I know we see this calculation, like if you buy a Starbucks coffee, every day for like 10 years, that's like what, $100,000 or 65 years, right? Something like that. But again, like if it gives value, you can have it, but try to cut in other place. I mean, Ramit Sethi says is like spend on things that you like and then cut cost mercilessly on things you don't like, something around those lines. So yeah. That's so I know that's a long answer, but yeah, that's the advice that I would normally give people.
Yeah. And I realized, we said, hey, it's a math problem. I said it, but
Yep.
I mean, really it's a psychological problem. It's a behavioral change that you have to put your head around.
True.
So like to say that it's just a math problem makes it too easy, because the math is easy. It's just like you have to change your behavior. Well, the thing with the food, so like we don't eat out too often these days. I think, in my younger years, I think I ate out more often, but we like to cook at home. I love to cook. So that's something, when I do go to the grocery store, which I enjoy going and shopping and stuff, I'll get basically whatever I want. I'll get a really nice steak or a really nice whatever it is, because it's so much cheaper to cook at home than to eat out. And we really like to, cook and eat food here. So that's something where I probably spend a lot more than like other people for food, just because I enjoy food so much, and it's like a hobby, basically.
Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah. And it's actually coming from upside, like instead of doing a reactive spending versus actually a proactive spending, and identifying what our values are, and then spending enough. Because for me, like health is something that I value so much, and I don't hesitate when it comes to spending on health. Versus like cars, I'm not at all interested in buying expensive cars, and so I care least about it. So yeah, when it comes to your own personal life, so what are, like in terms of values, like you said food, and are there any other areas that you splurge when it comes to like money?
I need to go through and sort of, there's many books, like some of my friends have written on identifying your values. So I should go and really think about it critically, but I know a couple things right off. So yeah, food's important. That's a hobby, and it's related to health too. So, if we're eating meat and veggies and mostly whole foods most of the time, that's pretty good. Of course, when we go on vacation or something, or there's holidays, like we'll eat whatever, but most of the time we're trying to eat well. Another one, like you said, fitness. I usually go to the gym maybe like 5 to 7 times a week or so. And, this week it's a little funny because I was traveling a little bit, and then I've been unusually busy for, a number of reasons, but I haven't worked out very much in the last week. And I think it's messing with my brain. Like I need the physical activity.
Yep.
So fitness is huge. And part of that is, being outside and hiking. So we're in Colorado. We moved out west to Montana. There's a lot of outdoor activities in the wilderness. There's not as much sort of busyness and traffic like there was back in Atlanta. So those are a couple of the big ones. But the other, now that I live here in Longmont, where, a lot of people know it's sort of like the mecca of the fire community. And there's a lot of, bloggers that people have heard of. There's people that just have moved here in the last few years that are part of the community. So just having a bunch of friends in a community where they understand sort of your lifestyle, and we have similar values on spending on, say, cars or any of the things we're talking about. So we have a lot of similar values. So the community piece is really big as well. And then, maybe this is related to health, but as I've started to work far less and sort of sort of like not shut down my business, but scale it down quite a bit. Just sleeping well and making sure that I have like a good nighttime routine, making sure I'm taking the right supplements that seem to help me out. They're not for everybody, but like, I take some of the supplements that we've heard about that help sleep, and things are just better. I mean, we're healthier when we get enough sleep and we're well rested. Just overall, I feel better and everything's great if I get enough sleep. If I don't get enough sleep, then little things could set me off. So yeah, I need to think more about values though. So thank you for asking.
Sure. I mean, I think it makes me even think as well in terms of my values that I always some people have this mission statement, and also like people, have this like value that they come down from, but it's always something that it's not urgent. So I would just skip that one, but I think I need to just sit down and come up with values. But you mentioned sleep. I mean, I've been like trying to optimize my sleep a lot, because I mean, I've read this book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And that, changed my mindset when it comes to sleeping, because I thought, you can sleep when you're dead. That was my mindset. But lately I've just got this like Whoop band also, just to track my sleep. And it's amazing. Like if I have a couple drinks and then next day I thought I had slept well, but if you look at my band, it's like, it's in the red zone. I was like, wow, this is just crazy. Like, I mean, I knew like alcohol would mess up with sleep, but it's like very accurate. I was like, wow, yeah. Plus, that's one area that I'm like working towards. But there's like so many things. I
was going to say we could do a whole show on sleep, because I've worked on little things and like started supplements and stopped them to see and all that kind of stuff. The biggest thing I'll just tell you, I'm a hot sleeper. I'm hot all the time. I just have a fast metabolism or something. So I'm hot all the time. And the chili pad was the very best thing that I've done. Within 2 days, it changed my sleep. I used to not get enough deep sleep, and just lowering my core temperature like really solved that problem. So I would say 90% of the time I'm sleeping way better than I used to, just because of having the chili pad.
Wow, I need to get that. I've heard so many times on the Tim Ferriss show, about this chili pad. Like, what, it's one of the most recommended items, I would say, on the podcast. But that's something. It's an investment that I need to like probably think about. But for sure, yeah. So we are coming towards the end of the podcast, and there are 3 questions that I all ask my guests. I call them the Hotseat Questions. So the first one is regarding taking action. So compounding project is all about taking that first step for the compounding to kick in. So what is one small step that you would recommend people take right after listening to this episode?
I'm going to imagine myself younger. And I think that's the best advice that I can give. So if you're sort of earlier in your career or earlier in your investing journey, I think it's just so important, and it's so simple to understand what your expenses are and see where the money is going. And don't forget, look for a full sort of calendar year, because there's some expenses that are quarterly or maybe every 6 months or something. So make sure you understand that little piece. And then from there, make sure you know your values. And if you can optimize, again, you don't have to over optimize, but if you can cut some waste out, then you're well on your way. And this is one of those things where like, once you set it up, once you go through the painful process of like figuring out where all your expenses are going, then you have a math problem. You could throw it into a spreadsheet, and then you see like where you should be over time. Now, it's not going to track exactly this, like where you think it's going to go, but it'll be pretty close, and you could adjust along the way. And then it's just a matter of following the plan.
Right. Yeah. Great advice. Yeah. And then the second question is regarding books, and books are an integral part of the Compounding Project podcast. And then what 3 books would you recommend in 3 areas of life? 1 book on health, 1 book on wealth, and 1 book on wisdom or self-help.
So I probably won't follow your rules exactly, but you reel me in when I go off track here.
Yep.
So I love podcast and YouTube. So I think from a sort of health and even fitness perspective, I think the Huberman Lab podcast, which probably, so many people know this is one of the top podcasts in the world. However, with a caveat, because I think Andrew Huberman like over optimizes some stuff, and he shares studies. It's all data driven and all like it's good information, but I don't want to over optimize stuff. I don't want to stress about my sleep when I first wake up, and actually like monitoring my sleep makes me sleep worse because I'm trying to track it too closely. So there's a balance of, it sounds like you have done the same thing, right? Yeah. So it's like there's a sweet spot, a Goldilocks zone of optimizing, but not too much. If you do too much, then it's a little too obsessive and it becomes unhealthy. And we see this with anything, like anything that's done to the extreme is probably going to have somewhat of an opposite effect. So, going back earlier, like if you're trying to retire as soon as possible, it could lead to deprivation. And then once you retire, then you're left like sort of confused about what you should be spending your time on, and you don't know your values because your value before was to save every penny, and now you need to spend some money. So if you do things too extreme, like Andrew Huberman sometimes kind of advises to over optimize everything, you can kind of relax on it. So yeah. I think health, that's what fits there. For the wealth, I think Simple Path to Wealth, like that would probably be the book that would have helped me the most. If he would have wrote the book, if JL would have wrote the book in 2005, and then I got my hands on it, it would be so different. Yep. So, and Wisdom and Self-Help, is that the other one? Mm-hmm. All right. I think, the Tim Ferriss podcast, I don't listen to it a ton currently right now, but over the years, that has been one that I go to all the time. And it's great conversations. They're deep. They go long, so you're able to really get some great points from it. And he covers so many different topics too, from entrepreneurship to business to like running a podcast to whatever it is that he wants to cover. And you know what? I'll throw in one more. One that I listened to a lot in the past and then went away from for a little bit, but I came back, is Choose FI. So my good friend Brad Barrett runs it. It's one of the biggest podcasts in the FIRE area. And, there's been different styles and formats of shows. And right now what Brad's doing is fantastic. He's just having good conversations with his friends and folks in the audience. And I really like what he's doing right now.
Right. Yeah. I'm a huge follower. I've been like, lately I've been like, listening to a lot of like health podcasts and also like wealth podcasts. But yeah, I've been a huge follower of Choose FI. That was my ritual when it comes to going to work. My commute time is Choose FI. That's my favorite podcast so far. The third question is a rapid fire. So I'll give you two options. Let me know which one would you choose. Like, are you ready for this?
Yes.
All right. So stock market or real estate?
Stock market.
Index funds or individual stocks?
Index.
Buying or renting a house?
Buying.
Right. Time or money?
Time.
And the last one, like health or wealth?
Health.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for these questions and answers. And so with that, Doug, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. So how can people learn more about you?
Thanks for having me on. It's been super fun. And I think we could have gone on for a couple more hours here.
Yep.
Best place to go is milehighfi.com. So that's the personal finance. It's really kind of an advanced, FIRE type podcast. It's over on YouTube and there's an audio version. And I think it's like once you understand the basics of FIRE, like those are the conversations we're having. So it's more about lifestyle and advanced topics and that sort of thing and happiness overall. And sometimes it's just a little fun. We go off on weird tangents every now and then. So Mile High Fi is on all the podcast players out there.
Sure. Yeah, I'll link them in the show notes. Great. I mean, if you found value in this episode, then please don't forget to subscribe to Compounding Project Podcast. Until next time, trust compounding, take action now.